Hey, I don't normally do this, but I felt this clip deserves an intro. At best, I consider myself to be a casual Star Trek fan, and these two ladies went deep on it. The concept of 735 is a new one to me, never heard of that, but it does make a lot of sense, and they really lay out a compelling argument. This clip is from my What's Good Wednesday show from last Wednesday. There are more shows like this every Wednesday at 9 p.m. Central. If you don't want to miss it, make sure to subscribe to this channel, hit that notification bell, that means everything. And in the comments, please let me know, do you agree with their take on this? Do you think Star Trek past 2005 counts as Star Trek? And I'm also curious, what iteration of the Star Trek shows has been your favorite? And if you want to get involved in these conversations as they happen, don't miss the live stream. And with all that being said, take it away, Raquel and Lady Balefire.
So I have a question for you, Raquel. You're obviously a really big Star Trek fan. Have you seen Picard?
Ooh, we're jumping right to Picard. I mean,
Wow.
I just have a question because
I saw her post on Picard, so I'm
okay. I
more than
have
happy
a
about
and
this
I,
one.
I'm just this is very specific. Okay,
Okay.
so having been an English major, having Star Trek was my first love. Okay, so I did the whole thing. I went to Star Trek conventions before there was the internet, when we were still doing the mailers out.
Good girl.
Yeah, and I noticed I've watched exactly one episode of the show. My boyfriend, he had to watch it, and I was like, okay, I'll watch it with you. And I was just so shocked. And I think one of the biggest things that I noticed about the change in the storytelling with this was that it went from being like an episodic TV show where you could have one standalone story to like a serial show. And I was wondering, since you seem to obviously you're very educated and you know this stuff, did you notice that too? And if you did, do you think that's impacted the quality of Star Trek?
Well, I think so. And I think it's all leading back to this same thing that I'm always harping on everyone about, and that is this treasuring of episodic classic science fiction. Because when you look at episodic classic science fiction, what are you looking at? You're looking at something that has been written that has a telos, or a purpose, or an end goal of conveying an idea. So the idea is paramount, okay? It's the most important thing, the idea, okay? Technology, futurism, some sort of medical advancement, making contact, astrophysics, okay? But when you see these serializations, what you're actually seeing is one idea that is spread out, protracted to the point of, inducing vomiting. And the reason why is because it turns to the interpersonal.
Exactly.
It is incredibly difficult to be like the Holy Trinity, to be like, I call them the Holy Trinity, please forgive me, but, Gene L. Kuhn, D.C. Fontana, Gene Roddenberry, these people wrote incredible short stories that were centered around ideas, and they had to come up with them every week. And then some wonderful person would come along and turn it, sometimes DC Fontana or Gene L. Kuhn or Gene Roddenberry himself would turn it into a teleplay. So those two things are different. Now, with these corporate people, these corporate rooms filled with nincompoops, what you have is one idea, no other ideas, and so they turn to the interpersonal. And then suddenly you find yourself crying in a hallway talking about how you like to eat mac and cheese. It's a disaster.
Exactly. I know that was
disaster.
what I was thinking about, because I started watching when The Next Generation came out, but my favorite was Deep Space Nine, and I kept thinking about it. It's like, I'm thinking, okay, we have the resurrected captain, we have the secret love child, we have we're bringing back the Borg, and I'm just like, this is so silly. This is not what Star Trek is. And one of my initial film school, when I first started taking production, we had an assignment and we had to remake a classic TV series, and the one that I got was the Twilight Zone. And that's when I started doing research into it and learned about the writers and who was involved with it. And I think Gene Roddenberry did something like that, a few episodes with that, and it made me think of Star Trek a lot, because it had a lot of the same kind of storytelling things in it. And that was, they were able to, in approximately 35 to 45 minutes, tell a concise story that had a complete arc, And I think like that the serialized element, or excuse me, the episodic element of the story of each episode, plus there were like bigger story arcs, you could definitely carry that over. But like the episodic nature of Star Trek was one of the things that made it so successful, because I don't remember if it still is, but I remember when I was really into it, I knew that Star Trek was like the longest running TV show in syndication. And to be that successful, it's like you had to be able to do that kind of like compartmentalized storytelling. You can tell a whole story in a single 45-minute episode, and that's what I loved about it, because I remember watching like the earlier episodes of Next Generation. Like, I don't know what happened like the episode before, but I know the characters, so this makes sense, and I'd enjoy it, and I love that.
Do you think that Isaac Asimov or Stephen Hawking would be inspired, or any of the other astrophysicists who have made a claim to being inspired by Star Trek, would watch the filth today and think to themselves, oh, this is so inspiring? No, there are no ideas. There are no ideas
Right.
in play.
No.
In my master's thesis, I talk about how Cooper, the gentleman who brought us the cell phone, was inspired when he saw Captain Kirk with his communication device. And, he thought to himself, I have to put the guts in that. And then, we have subsequent inventors who have come along and said, wow, TMP, let's do an iWatch, pad. We can do a pad. Let's do a pad.
I love that. I love that so much when I was a kid. I remember cutting it out like of cardboard boxes we'd get from Costco, and I'm gonna make like a tricorder or like a data pad. And now we have that, and nobody even blinks an eye.
And that's the connection that the public needs to make. And so it's my intention as a scholar to make that connection for them, and to say, like, I got your back. I'm what you're thinking and what you're saying is true. You're being gaslit. You love ideas. You're a person who loves ideas. I think it was your one of your president's wives who once said, small people or empty people, or something along those lines, just paraphrasing, small people or empty people discuss people, and truly like people who are worthwhile discuss ideas. And so that's the disconnect that the public is feeling, and it's real. And so there's no point in gaslighting them, because scholars like me are going to come forward and go, hey, what are you doing? You changed the genre. You changed the format. You big fat liar pants. Shin kicks all around.
Yeah, I feel like sci-fi has just totally transcended the realm of just propaganda. Like, I don't feel like we're reading literature anymore. This is just...
I haven't watched...
I just want to quickly call a Dead Man Walking, who's talking about Georgia, one of your short stories. Favorite story in the book, couldn't put it down. I read that one today myself, so that's why I wanted to highlight that. It's excellent. Yeah. And so go on, Copa, and then after I want to go back with Raquel with how you got into Star Trek, because it's a very different... you're not just a person who watches Star Trek. You kind of live it. And so, sorry, Copa, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, like, she brought up regurgitation a while ago, and I just want to point out, like, I haven't seen any of Picard because I know about the first 2 seasons and how bad it was. So I've been asking around, like, is season 3 even worth watching? And then I saw a clip the other day of the Enterprise going into a Borg ship, and it was split screen with the Millennium Falcon going into the Death Star, and it was the same exact scene, shot for shot, pretty much. And I was like, you got to be kidding me. And I was just wondering if you had any comment on that.
Well, the Enterprise should carry roughly 1,050, 1,060 people, but Captain Picard makes it quite clear that in times of need, we can go in excess of that by, I believe it's 200 or 300 more people. And so you would have to think, you would have to have an engineer and a physicist on board helping with the production of the show in order to make that accurate, because it wouldn't be, swinging around the way that it is. And certainly it's also very important to ask yourself, does this pass the sniff test, or is this a gigantic fetid poopy diaper? Because who would have the materials to make such massive voids within a starship so that, you know, a galaxy class starship could fly around in it. Now, this is pure speculation based on these little clips that I've seen, because I do have to tell you that I'm a member of the 735 Club. I started the 735 Club as a moniker for people who like 66 to 05. So I have not imbibed the filth, because when I think to myself, do I want shite smeared all over me? I think, no, I think I'm going to pass on the shite being smeared all over me. So I think that it's a joke. I think it's anti-cerebral. Real Star Trek is esoteric. It is cerebral. It's not for normies, and trying to turn it into Return of the Jedi is not going to work. People are going to call you on your BS, and you're not fooling anyone. Your member berries, they're great for some folks, but not the real fans.
Yeah, give us J.J. Abrams Star Trek, please and thank you. I totally agree.
Okay.
I totally
I'm
feel
triggering people. I know people hate J.J. Abrams. I know it's just funny that I couldn't care less about it. Just Star Trek isn't for me, but I just love whenever I just like, yeah, dude, too bad they couldn't just continue on with the Kelvin universe. Am I right, guys?
I missed, you know what I missed is so much. Like I remember buying scripts out of the back of some guy's trunk, because I won like a costume contest because I dressed up as a Bajoran Vedic, and I made my own original costume, and I was so excited. I got like $35, and I went and I bought a script out of a guy's trunk, and I loved how in the scripts it was like they get to something technical and they just write techno babble, and they actually would consult with scientists. And when I thought that was so awesome, because they just talk to scientists, like, let's come up with something that's like plausible for the future. And then I remember like watching this, I think it was the second to the last episode of 7 or 8 of Picard or something, and I'm just listening to the stuff that they're talking about science, and I'm like, how is this even futuristic? It's like they're talking about, okay, everyone under 25 has gone through the transporter, and we've inserted a strand of DNA into them. I'm like, that's literally happening right now. It's like they can do that.
This is what you were talking about earlier. It's pure fantasy, and it's okay to have a sci fantasy. Go ahead, have sci fantasy. Go ahead, but if it's plausible, it has to be science fiction proper. And so it
just didn't seem like advanced enough that they wouldn't know it in the future, and I just missed that.
Well, you missed that because the people who they were calling were like Stephen Hawking was a fan. Isaac Asimov was on speed dial for the TMP scene where they had an anomaly, so that they could check the physics of the problem. You know. I write science fiction, but I'm not an astrophysicist, and I'm not a physicist. I have a master's degree in communications and technology, so that communication historiography, cybernetics, things like that. But if you're going to do those sorts of things, you know, science fiction requires research. It requires a science fiction author who's going to sit down and get to the task of getting the research done, making sure that if they're outside of their discipline, that they have somebody look over their shoulder and say, hey, you know, that's not quite the way that works. And so once again, you know, it's just, you are a keen observer of the difference between science fiction and science fantasy. And there is room in the world for both, but conflation does no one any good. The only thing conflation does is benefit the corporation.